Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the iHeartRadio network, the #1 network in the United States, and also Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe according to Big C and his good old boys. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our friends in Latin America. Thank you so much for following the Charlton and Big C show. Today is a beautiful January the 10th, 2017, and we just came off of one of the best national championship college football games I've seen in a long time, Big C. I also want to say thank you to all of our listeners across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France, and of course you good old boys in Canada. And now that I got my voice back, Big C, I do want to apologize to the Raiders in the Black Hole because I accused the guy that dresses like Darth Vader of giving me something wrong, Big C, because my throat wasn't getting any better. But he did say, listen, it takes about 2 weeks for this moonshine to start kicking in. So, oh, Canada. I think, see, I can hit that like Lena Horne used to sing back in the day. But there's nobody I love more than the good old boys in the land of the free and the home of the brave, Big C. You were right. How did you pick against Alabama, Big C?
Well, it's not that I picked against Alabama, but Jonathan, I hope you're not dressing like Lena Horne.
Hey, I'm in California where everything goes, Big Z. Everything goes.
The wraps, Jonathan. The thing that I looked at it in the game last night, Jonathan, with Clemson and how effective that they could be, is that you go back to the Mississippi game, Jonathan, last year, and you look at what Kelly did against Alabama. Put up over 400 yards. Right?
Yeah.
You go back to what Clemson did last year in the national championship game, where Deshaun Watson alone accounted for almost 500 yards against this Alabama defense.
Yeah.
And also again this year, Kelly did the same thing to Alabama.
Yeah.
Where, if not for 2 pick sixes turning back, Alabama would have had a loss against Mississippi again this year, Charlton. But they were facing the same Deshaun Watson, who has gone out last year and had a tremendous game. And you look at some of the games that Deshaun Watson put together this year, Charlton.
Yeah.
The true difference in this game was at the quarterback position. Curry had a tremendous freshman year, but he had some inconsistency. And I felt that with Lane Kiffin being gone offensively, that Alabama would struggle from that and that alone. And when they lost Scarborough to the broken leg, you could see the panic on Lane Kiffin's face.
Yeah.
Sarkisian.
Yeah.
What Lane Kiffin had rolled the previous week in a game against Washington, he didn't have that same thing to replicate. But you also got to look at this vaunted Alabama defense, Charlton, that was on the field for 99 plays.
Wow.
Okay? They basically played another quarter of football last night, Charlton. They had only averaged 63 plays a game during the season on defense. And with the rotation that they have defensively, you got to figure that the starters may play 40, 45 plays a game. So when they were pushed into double figures, it was almost like them playing 2 games what they had been compared to all year long. But 99 plays against supposedly the best defense in college football, Charlton. Yeah. That's unheard of.
Well,
Big,
that's incredible that you bring up those numbers. And speaking of numbers, I want to say this segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive them, tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. Unfortunately, this time, you can't see the one that Big C was driving because it's flooding. It's flooding in California, Big C. How you good old boys live with this kind of weather, it seems. Every week out here, people are going crazy. People are ready to move out of California because it rained, Big C. How do you guys handle that?
Well, Charlton, you think about it, it's sorely needed. It's like last night down in Tampa. It was raining. Cheers for everybody. I mean, an outstanding game, Charlton. But also, what was good about that game, Charlton, is also what's wrong about the game of college football now, Charlton.
What's that?
The game last night lasted over 4 hours.
Oh, yeah.
4 hours from start to finish. Now, you think about that. I remember when we thought 3 hours was long for a football game. We've gotten to 3 hours. 4 hours and 8 minutes to be exact, Charlton, from start to finish. Now, we talk about the monies that are involved in college sports now. That was a pure revenue game. Excessive commercials. 2 too much time being taken, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Commercials, I believe, extended out to 3 minutes last night.
Wow.
Each timeout was, timeout was 60 seconds. They made it to 3 minutes last night on timeouts, Jonathan. So, extending a game to that length, and now this also causes injury with the players.
Yeah.
Because that time on the field, they get fatigued. And, this late in the season, Jonathan, having played this many games, you think about it. Last night was the 15th game of the season for a college football team.
Yeah.
This is thrown in between classes, road games.
Classes? Who's going to class, Big C? Anybody you know of?
Well, they may not be out of Christmas break yet, Jonathan.
Oh, okay.
They out there making the universities money, so, they get to go to some late classes.
Oh, okay, I understand now.
Let me put this on a pedestal for you, Jonathan. When you look at in the playoffs this year, you've talked about the heritage teams that were in the playoffs, okay?
Yeah.
That we had last year. Ohio State and Alabama, the heritage universities, the Big Ten,
yeah,
and the SEC.
Yeah.
But Dabo Swinney played against allegedly the two greatest coaches in college football this year in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Ohio State in game 1.
Yeah.
They throttled Ohio State. I believe they shut them out.
Yeah, 31-0. 31-0.
And this is a legendary coach at Ohio State.
Yeah, Urban Meyer. Yeah.
Okay, who's won national championships at 2 universities. Now he goes a week later and throttles supposedly the greatest coach in college football history.
Yeah.
Who's won championships at a couple different universities also.
Yeah.
So where does that place Dabo Swinney now? If he can go in back-to-back weeks, throttle the two supposedly greatest coaches in college football, and last year he was just a touchdown away from beating them last year in that game.
Yeah.
So where does that place his legacy now, even though he's only won one championship?
Yeah.
Where does that place him? And also think about this, Charlton. He's an Alabama alumnus.
Yeah.
If Nick Saban ever, retires, is Dabo Swinney number 1 on the list, or is Clemson going to make him a very happy man?
Well, if Clemson is smart, they make him a very happy man because he doesn't have to go to Alabama, Big C, to enjoy the success. And I think you may or may not agree with this, but in the ACC, they have a really good conference based on bowl games now. We see how well they did in the bowl games, Big C. But he doesn't have that pressure that Alabama's going to have every year. Again, they hadn't won the championship since 1981 at Clemson, and he's still beloved there, Big C. Your thoughts on the pressure being so high at Alabama? Only Nick Saban, he was only competing against the great Paul Bear Bryant, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't even know if Nick Saban is competing against Paul Bear Bryant, Charles. I think Nick Saban is competing against Nick Saban.
Yeah.
And I think his ego really got in the way last week, Charlton. I looked at the media lambasting Kiffin after Saban got rid of him. Oh, yeah, he was a distraction to the team because he had taken his job. No one said that last year about Kirby Smart, okay, Charlton? Kirby Smart was the defensive coordinator with Nick ever since he's been at Alabama.
Yeah.
He took the head coaching job at Georgia. Stayed on through the championship game. No one said a word about that. But Kirby Smart was not looked at like a Lane Kiffin, the guy who was running the offense.
Yeah.
I think the egos of everybody in Alabama said anybody can do what Lane Kiffin does. Now, if you go back to the game the week before against Washington, they played very pedestrian in the first half offensively.
Yeah.
Not until the second half did Hurd get on track and really start rolling with that tired offense. But that was Lane Kiffin controlling the reins. And like I said, I didn't feel that the players would be able to respond to Sarkisian because it's a different mindset. He's been in the box all season long, Charlton. Now he's down on the sideline. He's up close and personal, and his emotions are different than what Kiffin's emotions are.
Yeah.
But, here it is, Saban said, I can win with anybody because my team is so good. He proved that he can't last night. That when a system is good, we witnessed this 2 weeks ago with a professional team, Charlton, that everybody calls America's team. I'm trying to remember. Is it the Dallas Cowboys now? Yeah. The Dallas Cowboys. When you break up continuity, something that has worked, and this is what I talked about, that Dallas is going to have problems this week in the playoffs. You broke up something that worked well, and that's what Nick Saban did this week at Alabama. Now all the media has to eat crow.
Yeah.
Because they were laughing at Lane Kiffin. Oh, yeah, he's got rid of him. He was a thorn. He was a distraction to the team. Okay, he's gone. out there to help this young quarterback, Charlton, that he has mentored all year long and helped make him what he was. Lane Kiffin was the card that caused Alabama to lose. People talk about the defense being on the field for 99 plays.
Wow.
And you don't know how to use the rotation properly on offense with the running backs that Alabama has, situational scenarios that occur. It's different. And the rhythm that Kiffin had developed with Alabama, you think about over the last 2 years, Charlton. In 2 years under Kiffin, Charlton, Alabama had been 28-1.
Wow.
Him as the offensive coordinator. In the last 2 years with Lane Kiffin as the offensive coordinator, Alabama was 28-1, and he loses his damn job. You tell me how.
Well, Big C,
you make a team 28-1 and you're not good enough to coach?
Well, Big C, I think that is so powerful. You know, the great Paul Feinbaum that covers the SEC, he's so pro-Alabama that he doesn't even look at the other side of the coin, and each coin has two sides unless you're down there in Jerry Jones country. It's only his side of the story. But, you know, I thought that Alabama, when Scarborough got injured, he broke a leg, that had two purposes. Number one, it shows the top athletes, why are you giving your free talent to the college football? That guy should be in the NFL making about $5 to $10 million a year. That's just my professional opinion. And I know some of these coaches, they have this rah-rah attitude. You guys should take one for the team. You should always play with your team because you're going to regret later in life that you did not play the final game with your teammates and you broke your leg and cost yourself $25 million. For any coach that thinks that, just donate all your money to the athletes or donate it to something. I think what McCaffrey did at Big C and what Leonard Fournette did down at LSU, they decided to take their talents to the NFL. And so the thing that I think about with Scarborough breaking his leg, Big C, when he had Kiffin on the sidelines, the quarterback, he could always look to the sideline and say, Coach, what am I doing? Well, but Sarkisian had the man throwing downfield 30 and 40-yard passes when all they needed was about 5 yards on a third down. Why throw 30 and 40-yard passes with a freshman when you need to roll him out and let him throw 5 or 10 yards the same way Watson did on the touchdown pass, Big C? I think you're right. Not having Sarkisian calling plays cost him because Lane Kiffin is almost like taking someone to the prom. You're dating this girl the whole year, Big C, but for the prom, you're going to trade her for somebody else, and she may not even show up, Big C. Your thoughts on that? I think you're 100% accurate, Big C.
Well, like I said, it came down to saving ego.
His ego.
And nobody will say that in mainstream media that it was about saving his ego. You know, Lane Kiffin was getting a lot of credit for offensive success at Alabama. You had heard.
Yeah.
He had been the first true freshman to be SEC Offensive Player of the Year since the great Herschel Walker. And we know what his career ended up at in the SEC. If he'd have played one more year, he'd be college football's all-time leading rusher. In 3 years, Herschel Walker had 1,500 yards rushing.
Wow.
At the University of Georgia. Just 3 seasons, Charlton, and did not start until his 4th game of his freshman year. So that lets you know how dominant of a college player that Herschel Walker was. But when you look at what Hurd had done with his productivity, when he struggled, he had Lane Kiffin as a mentor to get him through the tough spots, Charlton. He didn't have that in last night's game. You look at Deshaun Watson since he's been there at Clemson, Charlton, how he's grown up over the years. Now, you know, he graduated in 3 years from Clemson. So he's had his degree, but he stayed around when he could have entered the draft last year because he had already graduated.
So wait a minute, Big C. Big C. Are you saying that Dabo Swinney did not change his offensive coordinator the week before the game? Is that what you're trying to say, Big C?
I think he may have kept him intact, Charlton, that he understood that what had got him there would get him over the top. Why change? You know, if you're in the Kentucky Derby and a horse, would you stop that horse, Charlton, halfway through the race and say, hey, let's change jockeys? No, you wouldn't. You let that horse continue running through the finish line. And like I said, it came down to Nick Saban's ego. No one in the mainstream media is going to knock Nick Saban because he'll keep him off campus.
Yeah.
Won't give him access to his players. So they're going to need those stories from Alabama. And Nick Saban said, if you bash me in the media, I do not allow you on the university because I run this state.
You're talking about Paul Feinbaum? Is that who you're talking about, Big C?
Paul Feinbaum and anybody else, Charlton. Paul Feinbaum will pass the toilet paper to Nick Saban when he needs it, okay?
Yeah, he might pass the Kleenex after this.
Let me say it right there for him. So he's going to do whatever Nick Saban says. last week he rolled Lane Kiffin like a broke down dog.
Yeah, I saw that.
He did. He talked about Lane Kiffin. He called him everything but a child of God.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
Yeah.
He said he was responsible for this Alabama offense being lackluster, blah, blah, blah. Anything that he could say. He couldn't find anything positive to say about an offensive coordinator that in the last 2 years was 28-1. Okay?
Yeah.
28-1 with two different quarterbacks, Jonathan. And each one of these quarterbacks only played 1 year. Coker only played 1 year.
Yeah.
Because he was the transfer out of Florida State who backed up Sims when he came. So he was only a 1 year start. If you look at it over 3 years, Jonathan,
Yeah.
you know, not just the 2 years, because he had 3 different quarterbacks over 3 years at Alabama. And in those 3 years, Jonathan, he lost 3 games. In 3 years, he lost 3 games as an offensive coordinator there at Alabama. So technically, this man, not just 28, Jonathan,
Yeah.
but he was 40-3. 40-3 in 3 seasons. Find that anywhere else in college football, Jonathan, that an offensive coordinator is 40-3, even a head coach, 40-3 and loses their job.
You know what's ironic about that, Big C? When you talk about the human ego, and if you don't have someone to keep you in check, the ego can be your worst enemy. And when you look at Saban in championship games, Big C, he was trying to go to 14. Actually, he's 13-1, I believe, in championship games. Now 13-2. But it's such a staggering and a glaring point that you just made. When you take away the guy that's gone 40-3, leading your team at the top of the college football world, where everybody plays their best game, and your ego is so big that you fire him the week before the biggest game in your senior players' careers, Big C. The week before, they ask these guys to play for free. They always talk about the athletes that don't want to play in the championship game or the bowl game and how they're turning their backs on their teammates. Well, don't all these players, the ones who are too afraid to say anything, they won't say anything. But these guys have to feel betrayed because they know they were sucking wind and they could not get the offensive drives they needed because they had a quarterback who didn't know that trusted face that he had on the sideline from day one when they played at USC. That trusted voice, that guy that knew him inside and out, he was gone. He was gone for someone else that came to the prom that Nick Saban put there to tell the whole world that I can win because of my ego, not because of the hard work that Lane Kiffin put in. Would that be a home run or did I strike out, Big C?
Jonathan, you hit the nail on the head. You know, it's all about Nick Saban. No one really wants to know who his assistant coaches is, but you had an assistant coach, Jonathan, that had been a head coach on both levels and had success. You know, and that was the problem that was the toughest. Everybody looked at Alabama's offensive success over the last 3 years with Lane Kiffin running the system to, wow, it's just not Nick Saban. This is a team that's scoring points. That they played 3 different quarterbacks and made it to the playoffs 3 consecutive years. Now, that's pretty miraculous. You think about it, they're the only team, Jonathan, that has made it to the playoffs 3 consecutive years. Not even Ohio State, who's only made it twice. But 3 consecutive years, Alabama's made it to the playoffs with 3 different quarterbacks.
Yeah.
That has to be something about the offense that allows for that to occur. Yes, you can play great defense, but you have to score points, as we saw last week with Ohio State.
Yeah.
When they could not score a point against Clemson, that lets you know how powerful Clemson defense was, that they shut down the representative from the Big Ten. They came in, and it was like they were not even on the field. So you knew that they could go out and play physically with Alabama. And everybody just expected Clemson to roll over. But when Clemson scored 40 points on Alabama last year, Jonathan, that they proved that this defense they were not intimidated by. And that's what the media looks at. You have so many fans in the media. No one in the media wanted to be anti-Nick Saban. Like I said, you want access to Alabama's campus. So you didn't want to be anti-Nick Saban at all during the week running up to the championship. It was all Alabama. How could they lose? And then you wanted to give, Nick Saban a pat on the back and start lambasting Lane Kiffin.
Yeah.
He was a distraction. The players didn't want it. The players had a meeting saying, Coach, you need to get rid of this guy. I didn't hear one player saying that had to happen.
No.
There was not one player coming out in the media. So it's always amazing, Jonathan, what the media can say that a player said without the player ever opening his mouth.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right about that, Big C. Everyone knows if they tell the truth that without Lane Kiffin on the sidelines, it was going to be harder for them to go up against a stout defense the way Clemson was, and they were driven. I still think as great as that game was, Alabama was 1 second away from repeating as national champions. That's why every inch counts. That's why every yard counts. That's why every play counts. Just 1 second away from being the repeat national champions. I want to say this segment is sponsored by the California Lottery. What can a buck do for you? Tonight's Mega Millions over $100 million, Big C. And that's a lot of money. You could buy a lot of moonshine with $100 million, Big C. But what would you do with $100 million and it's raining, Big C? Would you go out and buy another muddy Escalade, Big C? Or how would you deal with that, Big C?
Well, Charles, I think I'm going to have to get myself a bigger pontoon.
Oh, yeah.
When I'm out there on the lake, if I fall asleep, I won't have to worry about getting
That's funny.
We'll go out there, the lakes are rising and everything, get a bigger boat, take more people out, and enjoy it. Think about this, Charlton. When you're out there floating and not driving the boat,
oh, yeah.
you can't get a DUI. I'm good with that.
That's funny.
The lottery would be great to have a multitude of people win it all at one time, Charlton. We know that the education system around America benefits from it because part of the money from the coffer goes into the education system of the states that play the lottery. So that helps and benefits the youth of America, not just families, but the youth of America. Whoa. So, go out and play, responsibly when you play the lottery. Don't play more than necessity, what you can afford.
Yeah.
Play within reason, and if you hit, share the wealth with some family and some friends and some of those charitable organizations that are in need.
Well, that's very true, Big C. I want to just take a small diversion away from college football, and we'll get back into how some of the final rankings shaped up. Over the weekend, we had what's called the Golden Globes out here in California. I know the only thing gold you guys like down in the South is a championship trophy, Big C. But out here in Hollywood, they also give out golden trophies. And the great actress Meryl Streep, at the Golden Globes, she had some things to say that were negative about, President-elect Donald Trump. And Donald Trump spent several hours, I guess, retweeting what Meryl Streep was saying about him being a bad guy and wanting to kick all the Mexicans out of the country and building a wall to keep the Hispanics from coming into the United States, even though he puts money in his plants down in Latin America, Big C. And I just want to get your thoughts on, did you hear how Donald Trump has spent so much time going after Meryl Streep out of Hollywood? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think about this supposedly new leader of the free world, and here he is attacking private citizens like he's done his entire life, Charlton. This is not a politician. This is an egotistical, person that is going out there attacking mainstream people. These are private citizens, and I think they have this piece of paper that they wrote at the beginning of the United States, development called the Constitution.
Yeah.
And I think there's one of these amendments in there called freedom of speech.
Yeah.
That you can say what you want as a private citizen without recourse. And I think Meryl Streep is a private citizen. She's not a politician. But Donald Trump, president-elect, cannot separate the two. He cannot separate the power of the office from disrespecting people. That's his problem, and that's America's problem. If it's his problem, it's America's problem, Jonathan, because he's callous about what he does. And I think about the First Lady who said you need an adult in the White House.
Yeah.
You have to be an adult to be ready for that job. Donald Trump is childish.
Yeah.
And he has been childish from the beginning of his campaign, through his debates, and even after his elections. You thought that at some point he might find some class. But you think about a classless individual that's perpetuated by Fox News on a daily basis that he's the greatest thing, since sliced bread.
Yeah.
He doesn't do anything wrong, and every move that he has made has been great for the country because he has saved 1,400 jobs, and even though President Obama saved 180+ thousand jobs with saving the auto industry, 6 years ago, that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. So, when you think about it in comparison, people forget about what's good.
Yeah.
What people do good. President Obama has done so much. He went to work every day with class and dignity against great odds from his own people, Charlton.
Yeah.
From the politicians that were elected to work with him. When you think about what those politicians across the aisle robbed America of, not President Obama, because he's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But what they robbed America from over 8 years span, the things that they did not cooperate with the president on because because he was an African American,
Yeah.
they were offended by that. And everybody knows that it wasn't politics with President Obama. It was, segregation.
Yeah.
It was racism. The reason why the Republicans fought him so hard. You got to think of the Republican Party and the people that are in it and the people that led it. These are old-time good old boys.
Yeah.
People that Trump talked about being elected. These are good old boys who ran America, who had things their way, pre-segregation, that you could go and say anything that you wanted to people. All of a sudden, there's a black guy that's their boss.
Yeah.
And they had to get together to fight everything he did. But they were fighting him, but that's where people lost direction. They were fighting against the citizens of America that had elected them to represent them and provide for them.
Yeah.
So everything that they thought they were robbing Obama over the last 6 to 8 years of, Charlton,
Yeah.
they were robbing the American citizens, but you had so many people that were too dumb to realize what these politicians were doing to them because they were racist also.
Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
It really hurts the country when you have divide like that.
But when I think about Meryl Streep, and some people may not like Hollywood, but she is a classy person, a classy American, someone that doesn't denigrate other women. And for young people that look up to her, because California has a lot of people who are in the acting industry, Big C, and for the president-elect to come out and almost try to bully a woman who has such prominence and is such a motivator for young girls, for him to stand up on his pulpit and try to bully this lady in social media. Number one, he doesn't believe in social media, but he trusts Vladimir Putin over the United States intelligence community. That's a scary thing when you think about it. But he spends so much time trying to belittle a woman who's successful and who can stand up to his bullying. But you just made a point earlier. He is so anti-freedom of speech, and I know you can't change the Constitution, but he'll try to. But if you got freedom of speech in America, then people love that. That's what makes our country great. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion. But if you have the President of the United States taking an hour out of his day, there's only 23 hours in a day, he probably sleeps about 5 of those hours, Big C. So taking an hour out of his waking hours to belittle a U.S. citizen over what she says on the internet, I think he would have more intelligent things to focus on. So last thing I want to make, I was talking to a lady who had to go in for open heart surgery. She's just in her 50s. She's Caucasian. And she was saying she had the hardest time getting insurance until the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, came into law by President Obama. And because of Obamacare, they could not deny her insurance. And she had an open heart surgery that saved her life. And she's so thankful that she had Obamacare. So for everybody thinking, let's repeal Obamacare, when you get sick and you go to the hospital, when they ask you, what is your insurance? Tell them you have Trump care, which means you don't have any insurance. And I just think that's a joke, Big C. And back into the world of college football, we just saw this kid, Scarborough, break his leg for the University of Alabama playing free football, basically free. So Nick Saban can make another $7 million. The guy breaks his leg. And now they're saying he doesn't need a cast. But what if he was playing in the NFL? He'd be a multi-millionaire, Big C. This is another point about why you got to pay players, or at least come up with an annuity so they can make money if they should get hurt. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is not the first injury that Scarborough had, Charlton. He began the year playing with a knee brace because of a knee injury he had from last season. Not until that game last week that they played in the first round of the playoffs against Washington, and he played without the knee brace all year long. This was his second game without the knee brace, but then he goes out and breaks his leg, Charlton. So you think about it, that affects your draft stock. Teams are going to say, well, he's injury prone. He's had the hurt knee, now he's had the broken leg. What's next?
Yeah.
So you may fall 2 rounds in the draft, Charlton, because of his injury. They know that you're a dominant player, but they can say that you're injury prone and you may not have recovered completely. So they're going to draft you 2 rounds lower instead of going in the first or second round, Charlton. Now you're a 4th or 5th round draft pick, which is going to cost you $4 to $5 million.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that people don't look at, is that they'll label a player getting hurt, drop his draft stock, Charlton, negotiate with other teams, and that's what happens in the NFL. People are not that ignorant that you're going to keep passing over players if you haven't negotiated with other teams. Don't draft this guy. We got our eyes on him at this position. If you don't draft him, we won't draft this guy.
Yeah.
We'll leave him on the board for you. This goes on, the collusion in the NFL, and sadly enough, it's generally African-American players that drop, Charlton. Look at Deshaun Watson. In the last 2 years against Alabama, Charlton, this quarterback has amassed almost 1,000 yards in total offense in 2 games.
Yeah.
2 games against the University of Alabama, the greatest defense in college football the past 2 years. Everybody has said that.
Yeah.
But he's amassed, personally, almost 1,000 yards. You look at the 2 quarterbacks, Charlton, that went first and second in the draft.
Yeah.
Last year. Jared Goff out of Cal, number 1. Carson Wentz out of North Dakota State, number 2. They're not even ranking Deshaun Watson in the same category with either one of those quarterbacks.
That's because they're stupid.
Either one of those quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson doesn't have the graces of being ranked that high. And I hope that he doesn't go to the Cleveland Browns as the number 1 draft pick overall, because we look at the history of the Browns quarterback since 1999 when they came back into the NFL as a new franchise, that they have gone through, I believe it's 22 quarterbacks, 22, 23 quarterbacks in that time. So no quarterback has a future being drafted by the Cleveland Browns. I hope that he does fall in the draft, Charlton, to a mid-first-round draft pick, where he can at least go to a team, Charlton, with some promise, with some talent around. But if he's drafted in the top 10, it will end his career early, because he will be with a franchise that just really has no support for him. But when I think about the extras, Charlton, dropping him, well, Jared Goff, participated in 1 lower-tier bowl game in his entire college career.
Yeah.
And won 14 games?
Yeah, 14 and 26 in 3 years.
And I look at Deshaun Watson. What was his record this year? 14-1?
Yeah.
14-1. In 1 year, he matched the 3-year record of a Jared Goff.
Wow. That's incredible. That's incredible.
And he did that, Charlton, in back-to-back years.
In better competition. Yeah.
In back-to-back, he was 14-1 as a junior, 14-1 as a senior. And people are saying that Jared Goff is a better quarterback. Jared Goff doesn't have the mobility, the arm strength. When you look at Watson, he can throw the ball, Charlton.
Oh, yeah.
And he's mobile. So, he's not going to be that target sitting in the pocket. He's fearless also, because he's played against some of the better defenses in college football. But Jared Goff was a franchise quarterback, and people are talking about they don't see that in Deshaun Watson, because let's talk his value down.
Yeah.
Okay? Just like Dak Prescott, let's talk his value way down. So if somebody can get him in the 2nd, 3rd round, they don't have to pay him $25 million, Charlton, on his rookie contract. They can get him in a rookie contract for $7 million.
Well, Big C,
if they talk him down.
You know what happened last night also in the world of college football, and when you talk about Dabo Swinney he went to the University of Alabama, and you have Nick Saban, and then you think about, we talked about Urban Meyer last week, and now you have Coach Peterson up at Washington. In the 4 championship football games, the final 4 for college football, 3 of the top 4 teams were led by African-American quarterbacks. And that reason alone, and you look at last night's performance, the top 2 teams in the country led by African-American quarterbacks, that's going to make the NCAA push for an 8-team playoff, because the only way to not have the playoffs dominated by black quarterbacks is to expand the field. Because I heard some of the knucklehead media saying that Deshaun Watson had a great game against Alabama's NFL-type defense. As you mentioned, almost over 1,000 yards in the last 2 games against Alabama, the closest NFL-type defense you're going to find in college football. Now some of these same knuckleheads are saying, what kind of a quarterback do you think he would be in an NFL team? What type of NFL system could use this guy? Could he have the same kind of success in the NFL? They did the same garbage to Vince Young when he led, it was a great Texas University over USC, and prior to that over Michigan, Big C, 2 of the top programs in the country. You can't find a job for Vince Young now. And unfortunately, I fear the same thing might happen with Watson, because they still want to see white guys dominate that position, Big C. If we don't change the format, let more teams in, these top programs are going to have African-American quarterbacks that are always going to be bypassed during the NFL draft. And before I get your thoughts, I want to say this segment is sponsored by United Labor, guaranteed $100,000 life insurance with no medical questions. We are also endorsed by the American Heart Association and the American Cancer Society. We work with all of the unions in the country under the AFL-CIO. and we're looking to hire over 1,000 licensed insurance brokers because we want to put people back to work. Big C, your thoughts on expanding the field so we don't see dominant African-American athletes leading these teams to national championships? Your thoughts, Big C?
Well, Charlton, when you look at the skill positions last night, that they were dominated by African Americans. Each team had one white wide receiver, Charlton.
Yeah.
But the tight end positions were African American. The running back positions were African American. The wide receivers, all except for one on each team, Charlton, were African American. If you look at the first three championship games, Charlton, that have been played, okay?
Yeah.
In the college football, this championship series, there's technically been 6 quarterbacks that have started, okay?
Yeah.
6 quarterbacks that have started. 5 of them have been African American. Okay? There have been 5 African-American quarterbacks start, Charlton, in these first 6 playoff games. And last night, 2 African-American quarterbacks. There's been 2 African-American quarterbacks, Charlton, win 2 of the 3 championships.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the talent of that, and people say, well, now you're being racist. No, we're being factual. Look at the same TV I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Look at the same stadium that I'm sitting in. And tell me what you're not seeing that I'm seeing. And you're saying that these guys can win in front of 100,000 fans, but they can't win in front of 65,000 fans on Sunday.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And they're consistent. We talked about Watson, Johnson, in the last 2 years. Being 28-2 as a starter.
Yeah.
In the last 2 years. The thing they want to pick up, well, he threw 15 interceptions. So, he won 14 games in the national championship. Well, he threw 15 interceptions. Is that your only knock on him, Charlton, that he threw 15 interceptions?
Brock Osweiler threw 16 interceptions, Big C. 16 for Brock Osweiler.
Well, look at Drew Brees. How many interceptions he threw?
Yeah.
Eli Manning. How many interceptions he thrown this year? Okay, let's look at some of the top-tier NFL quarterbacks and look at the number of interceptions that they throw. The least amount of interceptions thrown amongst any starting quarterback in the NFL, Charlton, Dak Prescott. Okay?
Yeah.
The African-American rookie quarterback in Dallas. The least amount of interceptions amongst any regular starter in the NFL. I saw the kid in L.A. throw that many interceptions in one game.
Yeah.
Golf.
Yeah.
Threw as many interceptions in one game that Dak Prescott threw all year long, as well as Eli Manning did the same thing, Charlton.
Yeah.
And a half dozen other quarterbacks threw as many interceptions in one game as Dak Prescott threw all year long, but they didn't get lambasted by the media. He got knocked when he threw 2 interceptions in one game against the Giants, Charlton. It was like Armageddon down there.
Yeah.
He's washed up. The season's over for him. 2 interceptions. Eli Manning will do that in the 4th quarter of every game.
That's so.
But it's okay.
Yeah, that's so funny you bring that up, Big C. And again, that's why you have Charlton and Big C Sports with the #1 sports talk show in the universe. We're freestyle. We have no teleprompter, no producer in our ear. And for the people that do that, that's fine too. But I'm just bringing that point up because you're not going to hear the straight talk anyplace else other than Big C Sports. Big C, when you look at the final rankings, something that you and I kind of had a bet going before the season began, before Alabama drugged USC's horse, and some of the players were drinking out of that same trough, that same horse trough, Big C, so they looked a little bit slow. But in the final 10, I'm just going to run down the final 10 for college football. #1, Clemson, and again, you call that. And to show that you love Alabama, I know that you're not a fan, but you're very high on Alabama. But for you to call out why they would lose that game, I thought you were very poignant, very prescient about that, so I'll give you credit for that. And I'm looking at Clemson #1 at 14-1. #2, Alabama 14-1. #3, the men of Troy, the USC Trojans 10-3. #4, the Washington Huskies 12-2. #5, Ohio State Buckeyes 11-2 on the Urban Meyer. #6, Michigan 10-3. #7, Penn State 11-3, followed by Wisconsin 11-3, and then Oklahoma 11-2, and Florida State at 10-3 are the top 10. Just to round it out, Big C, Western Michigan, followed by Oklahoma State, Colorado, South Florida, #15 Stanford, 16 Louisville with their great quarterback, #17 Utah, followed by Virginia Tech, San Diego State, and #20 the LSU Tigers, Big C. But I want to just get your thoughts. When you talk about these college football programs, I just ran off 20 college football programs. Many of these programs contribute to the billion-dollar industry that makes up college football. Most of them are African-American talent, Big C. At some point, we got to address that. But I want to just kind of tie in what I've been hearing with the chatter coming up for the NFL, and we'll touch a little bit on the NFL too. But going back to these top 20 football teams, Big C, why is there still no talk about how we can get these guys paid when everybody's telling these players do it for the love of your team, and you got the kid at Alabama breaking his leg? None of these coaches are willing to do it for the love of the team, Big C, and do it for free. In fact, Dabo Swinney, I think his bonus was right about $1 million last night for winning these 2 games. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charles, he might get some pizza and chicken for the players.
Yeah.
And the locker room party, toss that to them, say, hey, guys, here, eat as much as you want.
Yeah.
And have a Dr. Pepper while you're at it.
Yeah.
But, why would you pay this free labor, Charles? They go out, as they say, these players are out there for the love of the game.
Yeah.
That's a bunch of bull. You're out there trying to get to the next level. That's what college players are doing, trying to get to the next level. And any one of those players who thinks of himself personally, then they say, oh, he's selfish. Tell me what coach is not selfish when he's getting his paycheck or he's getting direct deposit, Charles.
Yeah.
He's not walking into the locker room, anonymously just dropping bills on the floor and say, I don't know where that came from, guys, but if you pick it up, you don't have to disclose it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not what they're doing, Charlton. When they sit there and they got their endorsement contracts with the shoe companies, Charlton, when they have their own television shows, Charlton, and they're getting paid for this stuff, they have sponsorship that's donating money to them. They're not saying, no, I don't want that, Charlton. How much more can I get? These coaches, Charlton, have agents like players, okay? They're not in there negotiating their own deals. That's how big and egotistical they are. They have to have agents representing them, just like the guys who were broadcasting the game last night, Charlton.
Yeah.
When you look at Fowler and Herbstreit, they have agents representing
No, you mean they didn't do it for the love of the game and donate the money to what they call underprivileged youth? Basically, they didn't do that.
Oh, underprivileged youth, they think that's the kids in their house. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Underprivileged youth, they know the kids in their house. So, but when you think about the level of finance that are involved in sports, Charlton,
yeah.
And yes, everybody wants to get paid everywhere. That's the American way. Everybody wants to have a job. But the job of an athlete is to make money elsewhere for other people. That's what it is. Even on the pro level, Charlton, they're making money for the billionaire owners.
Yeah.
They honestly are. Regardless of how much money these guys make, that owner is, you can say that the player's rich, okay?
Yeah.
But the owner's wealthy. There's a different standard of monies, when you look at it. Regardless of how much Tom Brady makes, Robert Kraft makes more. Okay?
Yeah.
He doesn't wince when he writes out the paycheck. You look at Atlanta with Matt Ryan, they're one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah.
The Arthur Blank is not scared to sign a check whether it's going to bounce, okay?
Yeah.
He's not concerned with that at all. You look at the Mayer family with the Giants and Eli Manning. They're not concerned. Even Robert Ursula, when he gave Eli Manning too much money.
Yeah.
He's like, here, no big deal. I still got drug money on the side.
That's funny.
I'm okay. These guys make money. But when you think about the universities, and we look at the coaches, you're talking about Dabo Swinney getting a $1 million bonus last night. We know Nick Saban's salary is $7+ million. We know Jim Harbaugh in Michigan is $9+ million.
Yeah.
Urban Meyer at Ohio State is $6+ million. So just when you look at this championship series, Charlton, it was basically Peterson out of Washington was a poor man.
Yeah.
He only makes about $1.5 million.
Oh yeah. In fact, he realized he's so broke he might go on a protest this morning, Big C, up in Washington, but it's raining too much. He might have to wait till the rain goes away, Big C.
But when you think about the 4 coaches, Charlton, participating in this series,
yeah.
You had $20 million, in excess of $20 million between 4 coaches in salary this past season. $20 million between 4 college coaches that participated in the national championship games, Charlton.
Big C, what was the color of all these coaches?
Let me check. I know that they wear hats because they're worried about getting sunburned. Okay?
Big C, what was the color of the majority of the athletes that make them multi-millionaires?
Well, we're talking, when I think about the plethora of African-American athletes on both of these rosters, Charlton, we talk about it. 3 of the quarterbacks participating in this, Charlton, with African-American. We look at all the running backs, Charlton, with African-Americans. I recall seeing 2 white receivers.
Yeah.
In this entire playoff series between the 4 teams, 2 white receivers. The one who caught who caught the winning touchdown for Clemson last night.
Yeah.
And the kid from Alabama, who was a transfer in there out of Bowling Green, so he didn't start at Alabama. But when you look at these players, Charles, the NFL. But, there's no talk about them receiving any compensation from Alabama or Clemson. When you look at these teams, Charlton, when you look at Mike Williams, the wide receiver from Clemson, maybe the best receiver in college football.
He's amazing.
When he was out of the game, you could see the lacklusterness of the offense. Deshaun was putting the ball out there, but Williams wasn't there to go get it. When he came back into the game, he made a difference. Even the tight end at Clemson, he'll be at least a second-round draft pick and a difference maker in the NFL.
Yeah.
But these guys, Charlton, are making money for the University of Clemson. We're going to give them a sweatsuit. We're going to give them a championship hat. We're going to get a pair of sneakers. That's what they're getting. But Charlton, that gear that they're getting, the university didn't even buy the damn gear. It was by the sporting goods company.
Wow.
The university is not even putting money for it. Nike is putting that gear out. Uncle Phil is donating it all. Okay? The university is not giving this stuff to the kids. You know why?
Why is that?
Because it was the improper benefits if the university was to be giving it to the kids.
That's incredible.
It's improper benefits if the university was giving it. So it has to come from the shoe company.
Yeah.
So the university is not benefiting these kids any. So they said, well, they're getting an education. How much money did Clemson and Alabama make off the game last night? This is what people are not talking about, Charlton. What was that television cut?
Yeah.
Yes, they're both in conferences, Charlton, but you realize each one of them keeps 1/4 of the monies that are giving out, and I believe each team's payout was about $15 million for the game last night.
Wow.
Each team received like $15 million. So each one of those programs will keep a quarter of that, Charlton. So they're roughly keeping about $3.5–4 million for their university.
Yeah.
The rest of it is doled out over the rest of the conference. So if you're in the Big Ten, which has, 12 teams, 13 teams?
Something like that, 19 from what I hear. Yeah.
And you're in the SEC, I think they got 16 teams, so Alabama will get roughly about $4 million.
Yeah.
And the rest of it has to go between 15 teams, so they all going to receive maybe $700,000–800,000 out of it, Johnson. So it's not really a large share. Money, though, but not a large share.
Well, Big C, the running back that broke his leg for Alabama, that ran all over Washington, and he was running all over Clemson before he broke his leg. How much money does he get last night from that game, Big C?
He's going to get some Band-Aids in an ass for Trump. And they say they're not even going to give him a cast. Think about that. They won't even invest the money in a cast for Bo Scarborough. They're going to give him a walking boot.
Well,
they won't even put a cast on his stabilized leg because it costs more money.
Well, let me ask you this final question about this, Big C. The quarterback that threw for nearly 1,000 yards combined against Alabama, Deshaun Watson, which Dabo Swinney said is arguably he is the best player in the country. I think all of you can see that right now. That helped, the University of Clemson take in several $1 million. How much money did he get for that game last night, Big C?
Well, Charlton, he got a lot of notoriety, okay? They talked about him. He's the only player, Charlton, to finish in the Heisman balloting runner-up twice consecutive. Only player in college football history, okay? He's the only quarterback in college football history to play in consecutive championship games, okay?
Yeah.
But he's the only player in college history to do that and not get a dime for it also.
Wow.
We got to give him credit for that, okay? He's the only player to make his university in consecutive championship games, Charlton, when you think about it, about $8 million, okay? In the last 2 years playing in the championship game, he's made Clemson roughly $8 million paychecks over the last 2 years.
Wow.
$8 million. But, Charlton, he has sweatsuits. Okay?
Yeah.
They gave him some sweatsuits, a baseball cap, and a pair of sneakers.
And see, the thing that I think I want to bring it up because nobody else will, Big C, it helps the parents of all of these athletes that send their kids off to get an education, even though most of them haven't been to class in the last 30 to 45 days, Big C. It would at least take some of that money and give to the families that are trying to send money to these universities or to their kids at the university so they can still play football and basketball and run track and field. I'm not being flippant either. I'm saying money makes the world go around. If you look at all of the national media, even NBC News opened up, Big C, with Matt Lauer. They were at the national championship game down there in Tampa. Everybody there getting paid, watching this free black labor make millions of dollars for the white institutions, and that's just a fact. And I know people don't want to hear that anymore because they're already comfortable. They're so comfortable, they don't want to even talk about who's getting so much money and the guys who aren't getting anything. And speaking of money, we're also offering athletic insurance. We can cover any professional sports team all over the country. Tweet out to Charlton and Big C Sports every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. worldwide on the iHeartRadio network. So Big C, as we talked about some of these great football programs, I congratulate all of them for the national championship run and this whole derby that we have. I think they're going to expand it very soon because there's too much money being left on the table for these top football games, Big C. Yeah, they're going to have to do that.
2 years, this will double to 8 teams.
Yeah.
In 2 years, when they look at what occurred last night, the amount of money and the amount of excitement over the first 3 years of this whole championship series, Charlton, there's just too much left out on the table. They're going to double, if not triple, the amount of money, adding four more teams, Charlton.
Yeah.
You know, where are these games going to be played? When are they going to be played? Is everybody going to play on the same weekend? They're going to have double headers, Charlton. Now you're going to extend it. Not just having a game, but you're going to extend it another week, Charlton.
Yeah.
So you're going to get another week. So college football, Charlton, we're already mid-January.
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking about pressing up on the Super Bowl soon with college football. That's how long the season is going to be.
Yeah.
So those 2 final teams, Charlton, that will end up in the championship game 3 years from now, how much time will they miss? How much class time? Because you think about when this playoff series starts is when schools goes back in.
Yeah.
So now you're going to be playing football for an extra 3 weeks. You're already going to be pushed. You know, you play the championship game now, Charlton. You got to play 15 games. Those 2 teams last night were in their 15th college game of the season. This is going to extend to 17 games in 3 years. College football championship game, those 2 teams will have extended to 17 games, Charlton, within the next 3 years. It's going to take 17 games to win a college football championship. Where's the money? An NFL season 16 games long, Charlton.
Well, Big C,
16 games long.
Who was that actor? I think it was Tom Cruise and Cuba Gooding Jr. They had a movie called Show Me the Money. Jerry Maguire. That was about 20 years ago, and I think the guy that Cuba Gooding Jr. played, I think he played for the Arizona Cardinals in the movie.
Played a
wide receiver, and they got it right in that movie. That was one of the better sports movies out there because it wasn't just about let's see who can tackle who and let's see who's the biggest and the strongest and the fastest players. It was about the side of the game that makes the game run, and that's the money. And when you have all of the athletes, they're the engine in the car that makes the car go. Now, not paying athletes is like not putting oil in your car, and you know it won't last very long without oil. And because a lot of athletes, they're still asleep, they don't understand the value. And I know a lot of guys, this has already happened. The guys at UCLA, also Northwestern, they started this, but they got it. Someone maybe knocked on the door and told them, hey, you know, don't fight for everybody else. Here's some money and go ahead and be happy. Kind of like what Donald Trump did to Jim Brown, gave him some money. So now he says, hey, the stop and frisk is not so bad after all, guys. You know, after saying he was appreciating Muhammad Ali, to just turn like that is maybe only Jim knows what happened in that meeting with the great Donald Trump. But I just think at some point in time, as this money gets so outlandish for all the white guys, meaning the coaches and the presidents and all the scouts that are out there looking at the next free black labor to go sign a multi-million-dollar contract, somebody's going to have a consciousness, Big C, and say, could you imagine if Deshaun Watson said, I'm not playing, I'm not risking, you know, $50 million, $100 million contract that I'll get going to the NFL. Could you imagine when someone has the intelligence to start thinking like their coaches and saying, if you don't pay me, I'm not playing. If Alabama told Nick Saban, we're not going to pay you, do it for the love of Alabama. If Dabo Swinney was told, we're not going to pay you for this game, just do it for the love of Clemson, do you think they would have been on the sidelines, Big C? One day the athletes are going to wake up and start doing the same things. Your thoughts, Big C?
Well, Charlton, if it was about the level of a game for a coach when they talk about they're so proud of the players that they couldn't be more proud of. Dabo Swinney was right last night when he said he couldn't be more proud of his players about their dedication that helped him make an extra $1 million last night. You know, he needs to be honest about that, just like Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, and any other coach in that scenario. I'm so proud of my players for winning this national championship and making me an extra $1 million bonus for winning it all.
Yeah.
Let that story be told, but we won't tell that about these coaches. You know, they'll talk about the impoverished situations that athletes come from, the hardship that they grew up in, and now they're at this university on the precipice of helping them win a national championship. They don't say this coach is sitting over there that, you know, if his team wins this game, he has $1 million bonus coming through. Tell that story in the pregame talking hype.
Yeah.
That the guys sitting up there around the round table are talking about. Tell the whole story. Why the coach is so motivated. Yes, he wants the diamond ring because the players are going to get their con.
Yeah.
But he's going to get a diamond ring.
Well, Big C.
Tell why he's so elated and he's crying. I just made $1 million off the backs of my players running 99 offensive plays.
Yeah, and that's so powerful because we're going to talk about the money because nothing happens without it. You can't even go to school unless the financial aid package is filled out, or unless that scholarship money is put on the table. You can't even get into the university without money. It's just a shame that everybody but the black guys get paid. And I know that a lot of people think, oh, you're just talking. No, honestly, look on the athletic playing field. Look at the guys that played in front of 75,000 in the stands last night. Look at the skin color of these guys. And then look at the socio-economic background that many of them come from. Many of them come from hard-working families that are just exploited by this good old white boy institution called college football. And I love the great Bobby Bowden, one of the greatest coaches of exploiting kids in the history of college football. And when he said, and I love Bobby Bowden, right? The wide right, left. Bobby Bowden, he's comfortable. He doesn't have to worry about where he's going to eat or how they're going to keep the light bills turned on. But a lot of the athletes that he recruited that did not get drafted, they still got to worry about that. Even the great Bobby Bowden said, if I was one of these young boys, I would definitely play in my bowl game because I would not want to let my teammates down. And then the great Nick Saban fires his offensive coordinator the week before the big game. Big, see your thoughts.
He let his players down by doing that, John. We talked about the national championship game and looking at the playing field and the color variances out there.
Yeah.
Yes, we saw several offensive linemen that were white, Jonathan, okay? We saw that. We saw a white linebacker in Clemson. But beyond that, Charlton, I'm looking at the starters last night in this national championship game, Charlton. I'm looking at all of the starters on both sides of the ball, 44 of them, okay?
Yeah.
Out of 44 starters last night, Charlton, I have a hard time recognizing more than 6 to 7 white players, Charlton, starting the game last night. That's an incredible number, Charlton. If we go back to the national championship in basketball that was played at Reliance Stadium in Houston last year.
Yeah.
With Villanova and North Carolina. I looked at the opening tip-off, Charlton. I saw 10 African-American players on the floor.
Yeah.
5 for each side, Villanova and North Carolina. 10. But no one is talking about giving these players anything, Charlton. They're raising their universities to new heights, okay, everywhere.
Yeah.
All across the country, when we look at the representation of the African-American athlete, Charlton, they're raising their universities to new heights and new esteems. I don't care which university you look at. It could have been the most racially, university in the 60s in America.
Yeah.
But now they're dominated by African-American athletes across the campus.
Yeah.
Everybody, you look at the University of Colorado in Boulder. It ain't but 12 black people live in Boulder, okay?
Yeah.
But the football team has 40.
Yeah.
Where they come from? They didn't come from local kids that were recruited in to play. It's as simple as that. Look at Ohio State. I tell you, earlier today, I was looking when I got back off the plane, and I sit down at the house. I couldn't go to sleep because I'm going to sleep all night tonight, though, trust me.
Yeah.
I'm not making last call tonight.
Yeah.
But I was sitting down, and I was watching the highlights of a football game that was played back in the 70s of the University of Texas and the University of Arkansas, which they said was the game of the century. Both teams were undefeated.
Yeah.
The late President Richard Nixon was at the game. But I looked at the landscape of this stadium, Charlton, that was played in Arkansas, University of Arkansas. There was not one black player on the field, Charlton.
Wow.
This is when Richard Nixon was president in the mid-'70s, early 70s. There was not one black player playing at either one of these schools, which was the Southwest Conference at that time, Charlton.
Yeah.
Arkansas was not represented by one black player. Texas was not represented by one black player. This was in the 70s when Richard Nixon, after desegregation, was the president.
Yeah.
African Americans still could not be on those universities. But if you look at the landscape of those two universities now, Jonathan, neither one of them will have
yeah.
You think about Nolan Richardson, won a national championship in basketball at Arkansas, where during that time, when this football game was being played, there was no African Americans on campus participating in sports. But Nolan Richardson, an African American basketball coach, won a national championship down in Charlotte several years ago when Bill Clinton was president. Times change.
Yeah.
But when you look at the staff now and the players on these teams, Charlton, Paulie Strong was an African American coach at Texas prior to being fired. But they've also, Charlton, had 2 African American Heisman Trophy winners at Texas.
Yeah.
So what would that program have been without those African Americans being there? Would they ever won a Heisman Trophy? They won a national championship with Vince Young, an African American quarterback. So when you think about the contributions that African Americans, Charlton, have made to these proud universities and get no credit for it other than a sweatsuit, a pair of sneakers, and a baseball cap.
Yeah.
That's value to us for bringing us all this prestige.
Well, Big C, I tell you, it's always about the money. Jerry Maguire, Tom Cruise, Cuba Gooding Jr., they were right. And when they said, show me the money, and you got to start thinking that way for all of you African-American parents who are out there. It's easier. I'm not making excuses for anybody, but it's easier to find employment when you're Caucasian. That's put it out by the government's report on the Current Commission. Last hired, first fired. We know that's been, it's been there.
Let's look at sports from this perspective.
Yeah.
Say all these broadcast companies fund traditional African-American universities or when they fund these mainstream universities.
Yeah.
If you broadcast those games, allowing those African-American athletes to stay at these heritage black schools.
Yeah.
Because the reason they leave is like anybody else. You want a better opportunity in life.
Yeah.
And this is your better opportunity for exposure by going to one of these mainstream universities. It's not that it's going to better your life. It's looking for a better chance of exposure. That's what they look at.
Yeah.
And you don't see, this is the first year that ESPN broadcast some African American games, Charlton, but they did them on ESPN3, so nobody got a chance to see them.
Yeah.
But no one saw them. Broadcast them in prime time on ABC, NBC, and CBS like you do Alabama, Notre Dame, those schools, Charlton. Let us see during the day, not a nighttime game. Let us see a daytime game.
Yeah.
Put them on one of those broadcasts. Expose them. Show that the talent is there. They may not have 100,000 fans in the stadium, but they got NFL talent on the field. And if you don't show them, Charlton, they all become free agents. You get cheap labor. I think about the great Emerson Walls,
yeah,
who played 11 years with the Dallas Cowboys, won a Super Bowl championship with the Giants when they beat Buffalo down in Tampa. Emerson Walls was a free agent quarterback out of Grambling. Didn't get drafted, went to the Dallas Cowboys. He was a 9-time All-Pro free agent quarterback. 9 times. But they drafted white guys like Bill Bates in the second or third round out of Tennessee.
Yeah.
Bill Bates was known in college, Charlton, for Herschel Walker running him over. Okay?
Yeah.
That was his claim to fame. But he gets drafted in the third round and never made All-Pro. As a defensive back, he played special teams. Emerson Walls, a free agent, 9-time All-Pro. Super Bowl winner.
Well,
but you could get him because he wasn't seen in college, Charlton.
Yeah.
Bill Bates has been all over everybody's TV screen getting run over.
Well, Big C, I think I'm so proud of the knowledge you bring because I know they're all saying attaboy and look at how great our team is and how great our program is. And I'm so proud of our boys, our young boys, our young men, our young boys, our young men for helping us put a few more $1 million in my bank account. And the fact is, when you look at the color of the athletes that made the multi-million dollars for these coaches, then none of them went to the bank this morning, Big C. But I guarantee you, Nick Saban had that direct deposit, as well as Dabu Swinney, off the backs of black labor, which wasn't that far from the way Jim Crow was, Big C. And also back in the South, when you had this sharecropping mentality, you worked and you didn't get anything out of it other than a couple of bites to eat and some gunny sacks to wear, Big C. It's just more high-tech. And I hate that financial disparity is happening in the world of sports, especially when they're recruiting young black men by the dozens. In fact, before we close, I just want to say they already came out with next year's arguably top but recruiting classes: Florida State, Alabama, Ohio State. They're already looking at them. They got USC and Michigan and the regulars up there as who's going to have the better programs. And it's because the number of black athletes they bring to their colleges so they can make more money, Big C. So hopefully some of these parents will start putting some pressure on their students and the universities. We at least need some type of an annuity. If you're not going to pay minimum wage, we know it's an antitrust violation. Jay Bill has already talked about that. We need more lawyers to step up and do that. Another thing when it comes to games, Big C, Connecticut, their basketball team is looking at winning 90 games straight for the women's basketball Division I if they beat the University of South Florida. That's a great accomplishment for basketball. And as we close, I just want to say, going into the weekend, we'll start talking about the divisional playoffs for Saturday in the NFL with the Seattle Seahawks at the Atlanta Falcons. That's on Fox. Houston's going to be at New England. That's on CBS. And then Sunday, Pittsburgh will be at Kansas City. And Green Bay will be at Dallas. And there's so much good things happening in the world of sports, Big C. I'll let you close out, Big C, in the final minute on your thoughts on, again, wrapping up the national championship game.
Well, Charlton, I look at this national championship game, and it comes in layers like an onion. You got to peel it away to find it, Charlton.
Yeah.
This game lasted 4 hours and 8 minutes last night. Way too long. I fell asleep 3 times, all right? But, this game, it reminded me of an NBA game, Charlton. You only had to see the last part of the fourth quarter to see the game. Because this game had so many lows in it, Charlton. Alabama got up early. The game went to sleep. But to stretch a game out for that long with these young men, Charlton, that are not receiving any revenue out of it, is an embarrassment to college sports to have something go on so long. But, when you think about it, and we've talked about the finances of the game overall, Charlton, that none of these players received anything. You think about the amount of money that ESPN made last night off of broadcasting this game, Charlton.
Yeah.
Yes, money went to the universities, but think about how much money they made. And they made even extra money because the game went so long, getting so many sponsors into the game, Charlton, so many commercials. This is exploitation at its best.
Yeah.
There should be a time limit. People have talked about Major League Baseball, that they need to speed up the game, Charlton.
Yeah.
When you think about college football over the last year, Charlton, not the last year, but over the last 10 years, games have increased by an average of 24 minutes.
Wow.
In the last 10 years. They've increased by a length of 24 minutes. It's still the same 60-minute clock. But the time of the game has increased an extra 24 minutes based on advertisement and endorsements for the exploitation of these players, Charlton.
Yeah.
You are forcing injury on these players. When you think about the time you have to be on your legs as a player, Charlton, it gets to this critical point.
Yeah.
And we talked about the number of plays that Alabama played on defense last night, Charlton. 99 plays.
Yeah.
One play short of 100. You think about that. They were averaging 25 plays a quarter. Alabama was last night defensively.
Wow.
25 plays a quarter that they were on the field. That's a lot to ask of these young men.
Yeah.
15 games into the season. I can see first, second week of the season.
Yeah.
15 games into the season, Charlton. That's too much.
Well,
so we got to find a way to ease the burden on these college athletes economically and physically, and hopefully the NCAA and the universities will start looking out for their well-being.
Well, Big C, well said. It was a great game. Hopefully we'll start getting some money into the pockets of the student athletes. You got to put oil in the engine. And speaking of putting oil in the engine, every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time worldwide, follow Charlton and Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. And as we always say every program, we have to find a way to end domestic violence. You should never put a woman through that garbage, and no woman should ever have to deal with that on her own. If you know anyone going through trouble, just call 911. And as we always take it every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time worldwide, follow Charlton and Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. And as we always tell you, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.